we talk about how Armand couldn't watch the game with us?
Oh.
Was it because you were rooting for Iran, or
It's because he didn't want to
let's
get
talk
caught
real
not rooting for the
geopolitics
US.
here?
No.
Who were you rooting for in the
Hold
game?
on, we're gonna talk Iran first. Okay.
No.
We're talking about Armand. We'll tease
No.
Iran.
That's not why. I didn't want to be around.
People cheering for the USA when we scored on Iran?
It's a big, like,
So who are you rooting for?
conflicting.
Yeah, I'm confused. Like, what is this like for you?
Is this like
inside?
an id super ego thing for you? Like
when I watch
conflict?
soccer, I need to be alone usually. If I have any stake in the game.
Are you naked?
His brother's the same way. His brother said the
It's an
same
erotic. It's an erotic.
thing. Your brother said the same thing. He's like,
Yeah,
I need to be
can't.
by
I need
myself.
to concentrate.
Yeah.
I
I
can't.
feel like it's a sign that
You guys
take
don't
too
take it
seriously.
seriously enough. Let's just be honest.
No, it's a sign you take it too seriously.
Great. I take it very seriously.
I was in a
No
seriously.
problem.
Not
crowded
very
bar.
It is the
People-
most serious thing.
People
It is
brought
literally not.
people brought to the bar their own fucking drums and shit. Like I was like all garbed out and like they're singing all these American chants like "We are the U.S. mighty mighty U.S."
Oh, yeah, I remember that
And
one.
it was like just a completely different vibe. I couldn't be there with you to understand the nuance because I'm just like getting drunk and
When I watch
loud.
soccer, I need to hear the commentary. I need to follow every play very closely. Like it's not something for me that's like sit and fuck around and drink, and unless I am just there to enjoy the game and I go to like a pub and just enjoy the game.
I watched the game
I don't
very
know.
intently.
I don't
Every
know.
single
Not seriously enough.
So when the goal was scored, walk
Yeah.
me through your emotional journey.
Yeah, were you happy?
Confused.
Yeah, you can't be happy.
Confused.
necessarily. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, I went into the game going like either team wins, it's a great outcome.
yeah, your team advances.
I'm American, but
Yeah.
I'm also of Iranian descent.
Right.
So what do you do there? It's very conflicting.
Well, like if the U.S. played Italy, I would just root for the U.S. I would like have a reverence for Italy, but like
It's a little different.
I think the clear difference is that there's a fucking revolution happening in your.
Yeah, it's not about the game because you guys know, there's so many. If you couldn't even, there's no Venn diagram to describe this situation. You have a team that the majority of Iranians don't even support. First of all, you have to understand this.
Oh, right. What do they call it? The Meli or what?
Team Melli is a nickname for the team.
Okay.
The people of Iran in general are so conflicted right now because they love soccer.
Yeah.
Their team is like one of the only sources of pride they've had in the last 40 years. Everything else is embarrassing because it's a representation of the stuff that this regime has been putting out into the world.
Yeah.
Because the players have been under so much pressure and their lives and their families' lives have been threatened, and they've been told, we will torture and potentially kill your families if you do anything at the World Cup. The Islamic Republic, there's this meme going around that like the proper name, they called it the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then there's the people of Iran, but they're like, no, we should say the Islamic Republic versus Iran. People need to understand the difference between the people in Iran and this regime.
Totally.
First and foremost. Secondly, this regime is in bed with FIFA and Qatar. Dude, have you guys seen what's been going on?
Dish.
People that showed up with the sun and the lion, which is the former flag of Iran on the flag, got kicked out of the
They're getting
stadium.
kicked out. Yeah.
People got arrested for having shirts that said "Women, Life, Freedom." Have you guys not been seeing this stuff?
No.
At the
Oh,
World
yeah.
Cup?
no,
Dude,
educate me.
it's insane. So Qatar is fully in bed with the Islamic Republic. FIFA clearly is backing them to do this because you've also heard, if you've been following the World Cup, England wanted to wear rainbow armbands. They were not allowed to
forced
do that.
Take those off. Yeah.
And then people are having this argument of like, respect the rules of the country. It's not your country. Don't tell them how to live. And it's like, okay, I kind of get that.
This is an interesting convo.
A lot of nuance, man. So you have the revolution going on in Iran, which is the Islamic Republic versus the people of Iran. You have the team, which is a source of pride for the people, usually. But the team went to a meeting with the Islamic Republic before the World Cup and did one of these moves and signed a jersey. So then the people went, fuck you.
Like the
You don't
team
represent us.
represents the government, not the people.
That's how the people felt. They were
Yeah.
very, very disillusioned and upset with the team. So then the team became an enemy of the people. And they said, the only way you earn our trust again is if you go to the World Cup and you do something huge, which is the video I made.
You went viral and your video reached the players of the team.
Right. And I have people that I know that work in Iran that got the video to the team for me. And yet, of course, these players are in such a conflict. So they ended up not singing the national anthem, though. I felt like it was a failure because I wanted more.
It's such a small step.
I was
huge,
reading
though,
the
for
comments under your video, and like it was interesting to me. Like there were a lot of people like who were like, "What you're saying is so irresponsible. Like you're going to get these people murdered." And I was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
Well, that's a real fact.
Yeah,
That's
that, like, just like hit me.
But that
like,
was
oh,
the
geez.
minority. The majority of people are like, "Fuck yeah, this is what we need."
So the hard truth of it, and the hard truth of it is like this government will kill these players' families. Like,
Yes.
they would have no fear of
Yes.
doing that because they run this whole show with.
Yeah, I don't think people understand the severity of the situation we're talking about. This
Right.
is a mafia of criminals. This is not about religion or anything. The religion is being used to torture and rule people.
So like imagine you're gonna be a father. Like
Yeah.
imagine like you like imagine you're playing for this team. Like it would be such a move.
No, that's
to,
why I
like,
said in my video.
spit in their
I said,
face.
I
Like,
hope. I hope what you do. Of course, I can sit back and say, I hope.
yeah.
I know what I would do if I was out there. That's a different story.
Hold on.
Well, that's a different story, and that can create a tangent.
Yeah.
But I hope is different than what's realistic. What's
Yeah.
realistic is that these people's families are,
At risk.
yes.
Like lives at risk.
So then they have to come up with very subtle things that they can do to send a message. And what they did was they didn't sing the national anthem. And that was huge. And that's when the news was released that got leaked that like, yeah, they actually are being like,
Supportive of this revolution.
well, the news came out that their families are being targeted and
God.
it was confirmed.
Yeah,
and they were
what
told
was
if
the
you do
reaction to that?
anything, well, so in the next game, they sang the anthem.
Really?
They basically had a gun to their heads.
God damn.
You know? And the people in the stadiums getting kicked out, cleared out. The Islamic Republic apparently, allegedly, hired something like 5,000 to 10,000 people to come to the next game with Islamic Republic flags cheering on the team because no one was cheering on the team anymore because everyone's so disillusioned. So you've got all these factors, right? Where in your heart, you want the team to play well because you know that deep down they probably have good intentions and it's representative of like the people. On the other hand, you want them to do something. On the other hand, you're upset with them because they haven't done enough. And then you've got the US and that situation, and you're a fan of soccer in general, and you're born and raised here, and you want the US to win. So to answer your question in a very long roundabout way is it was a very, very emotionally complex situation. But at the end of the day, from a soccer perspective, that day, the better team won. The second half, Iran was very good. First half, the US played outstanding. And, you know, Pulisic fucking sacrificed his body to score a goal.
Sacrificed the left nut. I mean, it looks like
So before we move on to our actual topic, can I bring up the Qatari sort of like cultural sort of stance, right? Like they're so anti this like Western push to be like, no, allow the rainbow armbands and whatever. And like on the one hand, I completely agree with the locals there. Like that's not our culture. Stop imposing your culture on us. You know, on one hand, that's fair. But on the other hand,
is it though?
I think it's fair.
Is it though?
I think it's fair. It's their culture
Is
to
it
be
culture to say we don't want your equality?
Let me get to my like next
Okay.
step. My next point is that like, but like this is your chance to showcase to the world your best side, and all you show is this fucking vile ignorance. And it's like, oh yeah, fine, have your culture, but like I don't want any part of it. And like the whole world just wants to discount you sort of forever.
This whole thing was a disaster the moment that it was very obvious that this is a bribed, corrupt World Cup.
Of course.
And then there's thousands of people that have died and they deny that too. So this whole thing has always been fucked. And then they go into the World Cup and they can't drink beer at the stadiums. People are getting arrested for doing media. You saw, we shared the videos back and forth.
Yeah.
Some Denmark, guys
Was just
from
filming a
Denmark
spot.
filming, and they're like, stop filming. It's like, it's as if they're in Iran or something. It's very weird. So I don't know. It was a very unpopular World Cup destination.
And my take is like, okay, fine, have your culture, but like nobody wants any part of it. Like
people
you're on an
raise,
island.
there's an argument that it's racist, that the response that Qatar is getting is racist. And the reason I disagree with that is because I know where people who love soccer are coming from. People that love soccer in the World Cup are coming from a place where They believe that the country that hosts the World Cup should at the very least have a decent team and love soccer. Qatar has neither of these things.
Wait, did they even have a team? I
Well,
heard
they
just
built
threw
it
one
just for
together,
the-
right?
They're terrible. They've
They're
never
terrible.
been competitive
They're
in
terrible.
any competition. They've never even done well in the Asian Cup that they would belong
But it's a
into.
rule that if you host, then
You're
your team is
automatic
in.
qualifier.
So you might as well
They're
hire a French
terrible.
coach.
And meanwhile, like
Terrible.
Italy's sitting on the sideline. Italy's won the Euro Cup. Like Italy's a competitive team.
They have
all
no
the time.
they have no passion for the sport. This is nation building. It's an investment in nation building, and it was an investment in being able to display to the world that their modernity and their desire to connect with the world. But it was a colossal failure.
Mission
It's like-
accomplished.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing me your true colors.
It was a colossal failure.
I mean,
because-
as I like soccer a lot, actually, but I'm like sort of a somewhat casual observer. But I love watching the World Cup and I love watching UEFA and big stuff like that. But I don't like watch it all the time. And to me, like my main takeaway from this was like, holy shit, FIFA is like one of the most corrupt organizations I've ever seen.
It's like SBS
It's like one of the
level.
worst
It's
things
well, and
I've
then the
ever seen.
documentary came out like a week before the World Cup. Did you guys see that?
No,
Oh, the Netflix documentary on FIFA?
yeah, hit me with it.
Oh, it's unbelievable. You got to watch it. It's like a 5-part series because in 2017, I think was the peak of the corruption, and they go through the whole thing, man. It's the
Oh, yeah.
most, it's a mafia.
But I thought they like drained the swamp, so to speak, and now this new guy is like still just taking bribes, obviously, to put a World Cup in this.
Well,
weird
that was
place.
locked and loaded already.
Oh, that was like part of the old regime.
Yeah, that was locked and loaded, and they went forward with it. So it was too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just, it's corruption. It's corruption everywhere. But to argue for corruption, you know, everything is corrupt. That's my belief these days. Everything has a level of
Yeah, it's
corruption.
like a spectrum, right?
Yeah, the U.S. is corrupt.
Yeah.
I don't think that's controversial.
I do think Eric's question is like an interesting one, though. Like, where do you draw the line between respecting another culture versus being like, this is inhumane? Like, where are those lines drawn?
They're also inviting, cultures from around the world to their home. So at what point do you expect the host country to kind of like, I don't know,
Show some flexibility.
yeah, show some flexibility, or is it their time to show, hey, these are our cultural
this is
traditional
who we
lines,
are.
and this is who we
Yeah.
are?
I mean, to play devil's advocate,
Let's play devil's
most
advocate,
of us
yeah.
are in the mindset, like, if we went to Japan, right? Like, we'd be like, oh, I'm supposed to like take my shoes off in the home, right? Like, we typically, as humans, are programmed, I think most of us, to be like, these are my hosts. I'm going to
You tend to assimilate.
have some, deference to what's
But
there.
hang on. I agree with all of that. But what does the rainbow represent?
Inclusion.
Okay. What does that have to do with culture?
No, to Qataris, it represents like homosexuality, right?
Correct.
Which is illegal,
they're
correct?
Like, they're like a big, yeah, it's literally.
But to
illegal,
make that a
right?
cultural, like you must respect our culture, and our culture has no respect for an entire percentage of the population. That
like,
doesn't
it's-
add up to me. That
I
doesn't
mean,
add up to me at all.
I'm not Qatari or Islam, so I'm just speaking out of my ass here. But like, I think they would say like this isn't like a cultural thing. Like there is no difference between like culture and like it's just one thing.
Hold
right?
on.
It's
What
not
did the
whole-
algo find? I just saw the algo. The algo made a face.
Well, there's gay people in Qatar.
Well,
they
the-
just don't
the
respect
first
them.
Of course,
result
there's gay people in
Right,
Qatar.
so-
of course there are.
The first result was sexual acts of male homosexuality are illegal in Qatar. My face was like, does that mean female acts or not?
Females okay?
So next result confirmed both male and female.
Yeah,
That would
homosexual.
Be, that would be
you gotta
so
respect.
beautiful.
You gotta respect the consistency.
Culture is very subjective, and the lines are blurry. And if you're going to argue that like homosexuality is not a part of our culture, I mean, I guess
It's not part of their law.
Yeah.
because their
Yeah.
law is Islam, right?
No,
No.
Iran's is, and that's the problem there.
Oh, so Qatar, there's like a divide there.
Well, I mean, Qatar is not a theocracy, is it? I don't know their system well, but it's not a theocracy like Iran is.
It's interesting. They don't tend to kind of be part of like that Middle East group, OPEC group. They've been cast out before. I don't know the details. I think it might have been in 2014 when they kind of got cast out. But you kind of see like Saudi Arabia, which is kind of the juggernaut of the Middle East, teaming up with Israel to fight against Iran, which people would have never thought that they would have diplomatic relations. And so I guess I kind of assumed that it would be odd to see Qatar and Iran aligned in the things that you were mentioning. And I looked up and I was like, oh, I I remember they were kind of like cast out. They're not necessarily a tight-knit group, and Qatar is usually the outlier in the geopolitics angle.
Yeah, I think Qatar's trying to do what the UAE did, right? They're trying to become an international hub. They're trying to bring in new business.
But you can't do it without being flexible.
You can't. So you got to let go of your culture. Because, by the way, what fucking culture do they have anyway? I'm sorry. But, like, what is Qatari culture? I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, it's like a country the size of San Diego.
Yeah, get hot.
Like,
Get hot.
I mean, I think literally it's like, I think it's a country the size of Connecticut. Like, what is that? Like,
Are you
how
going to
much?
get a fatwa against you now?
No, I'm just trying to say, like, I understand you have a culture, but if you want to become a modern country where expats feel welcome from around the world the way they do in Dubai, as Eric said, you have to provide a level of flexibility and understanding of inclusivity. So the rainbow should be the first thing that comes into your new culture. That would be the thing that actually shows people and signals to people that, like, we accept people from around the world
To
regardless
be fair,
of their
in
beliefs.
Dubai, you can't really be gay either, right?
That's true. You can't.
That's like the line. Like in Dubai, you can drink alcohol.
Yeah,
I hope,
we
'cause
know
I did
that
it.
from our friend in the Discord.
Mizzy.
Mizzy.
Yeah.
What a goddamn
What a
legend.
guy.
He's been mentioned more times on this pod than any of our Discord users.
So it seems like that is the line. not
But I
like-
don't have a problem saying I don't like your culture because you don't respect these people.
Well, I mean, I will say there's an argument that, like, maybe they are going to do a good job of attracting investment, because typically, like, you look at countries that don't have a lot of foreign investment, it's usually because maybe the rule of law is weak and they don't necessarily have business friendly, laws and regulations, but they're certainly showing that they can implement the rule of law. I don't know what their business regulations are, but there could be an argument that there could still be, like, an environment that's business friendly, even though it's not culturally friendly to how we would
Were you going to go?
approach it.
We don't have to. I did have something, but
Well, let's transition a bit into this. Okay, so we've got China, we've got Iran going through these revolutions, and I don't know much about what's going on in China, so I'd love to hear that. But I can tell you, 100% Iran is going through a revolution, just like I talked about on that episode. I told you guys that this is not just some protest. This is a revolution, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We're 2 months in now. And so we've seen what's happened in Dubai. We've seen what happens in Qatar with a little bit of modernity, right? But what's going to happen in Iran on the other side of this is really going to be the version of what I think changes the Middle East, because they've been living under a dictatorship, under this killer, psychopathic regime. On the other side of that, you're going to see freedom of expression in every area. LGBTQ is going to be completely open and free. There's already women in the streets that were kissing, and it's gone viral. Men holding hands, women taking off their scarves. This is not just about the women being able to take off the hijab, right? That was the spark. But this is about freedom.
So are you saying that even though they may not overthrow the
They
republic,
will overthrow. There is no other option.
but
But in the meantime, they're expressing as much as
But
they
are you
can.
saying there's a scenario where they don't overthrow, but they have more freedoms, like they're given
No.
leeway? There's like a negotiation.
all or nothing.
No,
It's all or
no.
nothing.
This is all or nothing.
It seems like in these revolutions, right? You just get to a point where once they hit sort of this critical mass, they don't go away, and then you get to this next stage where there's ultimately, it seems like there's like military conflict, and then the military seems to have to make a decision. Do I like fire on citizens, or do I like kind of turn on the government? It seems
Right.
like it just inevitably gets to that point. Like once you hit like some particular critical mass,
That's
like there is no backing
That's
down.
the rock and the
right?
hard
The
place,
regime is going to offer those terms.
You think?
They're ready to.
They're going to be like die.
They're ready
or,
to offer the hijab off.
Oh,
Okay.
they are.
Yes,
So they are
They're
compromising.
going to compromise to stay in power. I mean, why wouldn't they?
People aren't going to go
Why
for
would
that.
they? Why would they give up power and money?
People aren't going to go for that.
No, people aren't going to go for that.
No.
So they're going to try, but I think that the West believes that the people of Iran are here to change policy and sort of just evolve the system that they live in. No, that's not true. They're here for full-blown 100% revolution, regime change. That is the only way that this thing will be successful. So they might try to manipulate their way through propaganda. And they've already done that very well, this regime has. But it's not just going to be like, oh, here, take off your hijab, and everyone goes quiet and goes home.
But do you think in these revolutions in Iran and China, where you have an authoritarian government with very powerful security forces, police forces that are literally made and built to suppress dissent. And you would think that like with social media now, like you cannot withhold the people from speaking their voice, and eventually that voice gets bigger and that provides momentum, and these are overthrown. And we saw that in the Arab Spring in like 2010. And I was looking at the list of countries that kind of had issues. It was Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, Bahrain. And I don't know if those countries were ready for that kind of dissent. They didn't build a police force specifically to counteract it. But China and Iran have.
Oh yeah.
They've had a long time to learn from the Arab Spring, and maybe they're designed to specifically thwart these types of uprisings. Like they might be, nihilistically like designed for this scenario.
Any insights on what the protests look like in China right now? Because like I'm even questioning like what we see. Like is that even a realistic?
Well, I believe that what's happening in Iran was an inspiration for what's happening in China, and they're already chanting "women, life, freedom" in China.
Yeah.
So that tells you, know, what you need to know.
But like,
small
how clear is it that like the video footage that we see in China is actually real?
I was
like,
shocked that I
everything's
found that we saw video footage in the first place. Like I watched like a clip of a bunch of news stories getting put together, and I was like, how did they even get this footage? Because they're on a closed internet with heavy surveillance, and you typically don't see this stuff.
And you've experienced that, right?
With what?
On their servers? Like you've been to China?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, I thought you had. Okay, I've been, and literally it's impossible.
Right.
Like you cannot. You can't check Gmail.
My
email
is
didn't
real.
work.
I mean, I don't know if
Very
you guys,
real.
have you guys heard the white paper revolution?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's
what's
like
that?
sort of what's. So I think my understanding is it's sort of like symbolic. Like you can't like write stuff because then you could be like sort of persecuted for what you say and everything. So there's like just holding up
Printer
blank
paper.
pieces
Literally
of printer
printer
paper,
paper.
Literally a blank
symbolically,
sheet.
and it's sort of like you know what I would write.
Yeah, you
if
can't
I would
arrest me
write
because
it
I'm not
here, so
saying
you
anything.
can't. Yeah, but everybody's like,
Holy shit.
you know what I'm
is
saying.
So
Okay,
scary.
hold on. Did you guys see this news tidbit that like Apple is shutting down the ability to use AirDrop in
Yes.
China?
Yeah.
Because that was the way they were communicating, because that doesn't go through
Yes.
Chinese servers.
And
But
Google did something as well.
Apple shut down AirDrop in China only
Yeah,
Why?
for that reason.
So that they can't.
money, Armand.
because China is a big part of their consumer market.
By the way, short Apple, I
Yeah.
think great trade.
Yeah.
It's like pro money and pro humanity. I feel like they're gonna lose a fuck ton of money.
be
I
in
think they're
bed-
making this. They're making all their phones in these like borderline slave labor camps.
Yeah.
and then they're basically like helping the government support. Like
And in
their
exchange-
crackdown so that they can sell more fucking
And
iPhones
in
and not lose
exchange,
money.
China loosens the COVID restrictions where Apple products are made.
So let me get
There
this
was
straight.
revolt
Only like Guangzhou and
Right, where
like,
the Foxconn factories
Yeah.
are, they loosened the COVID restrictions in those areas. It was probably easy.
So
like,
sorry, I'm 2 steps slow on this, but Apple literally
Yes.
is supporting.
They cracked down exactly what
down.
he said. They were using
Jesus
AirDrop to sort of
Christ.
share stuff, and they like disabled it in some.
they disabled it
way, shape, or
in
form.
China only.
In China only.
where
yes.
It's a
iPhones have
software update.
Yeah, teach me how to short, Daddy. Like that's wow.
Here, I'm gonna Jamie this one
Unreal.
for you guys while you keep talking.
That's
It all
unbelievable.
like gets me fired up even.
I love my iPhone, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna say this
Bring on
revolution
the
in
Tesla
China,
phone.
revolution in China's got no fucking shot. Like,
yeah, it's not like
It's
the
just-
one in Iran.
it-
Tell me what you think there, Nick. Like, what's going on? Like, why does it have no shot? And how big of an uprising is this really? And,
mean,
why are we calling it a revolution? Because I wasn't looking at it that way until you guys called it that.
I don't think people have fully appreciated how much Xi Jinping has, like, consolidated power, and not just like power within the CCP, but using technology. Like, I mean, they're using AI, talking about like decentralized nodes amongst the city to understand when certain dialects are being spoken, when certain words are being spoken, to really
To
crack.
surveil.
Oh, it is a full-blown surveillance state, and there's some good articles in Foreign Affairs that go into detail of like how they actually manage these like neighborhoods and control these neighborhoods and control such a large amount of people, and it's using technology and force and the threat of violence, and they have the capabilities to squash this very easily and quickly.
I mean, they literally welded people inside their apartments,
Okay, so
and then
the
they died in a fire.
So the
Like,
iPhone thing
it's-
was the one thing. There was like people protesting in the city where the factory was, where that makes iPhones, and then there was a fire, and people were welded into their homes because of COVID restrictions, and then there's fire in the building. The fire trucks couldn't even get close enough to spray water on the building because of COVID restrictions. Like they didn't. There was barriers. So there's video of like the water being shot towards the building and it literally falling short of the building. So basically, all these people are trapped, welded into their homes, dying while the building's on fire, and these COVID restrictions won't even let the fire department like come in and put out the fire.
It's like horrifying.
Is this like Orwell's worst nightmare?
I mean, basically, it's like
Worse, huh?
yeah, it's all the 1984 shit. But like to your point earlier, Nick, like the Chinese thing isn't just like they use technology to enslave their people. There's like an element of like there's like a bargain there. There's been a bargain there for a while. Like the CCP for a long time has basically been like, yes, you will give up a lot of your freedom to us, but we will bring you prosperity. And for a while, they mostly have done that. I think there's like an interesting argument to be made that like there's not really prosperity there. There's this sort of like centrally controlled like economic manipulation that maybe now is like finally unraveling. Like you know, like I've always expressed like so much skepticism about this idea that China is this like massive like economic superpower that's going to like dethrone us, because I've always just seen like a currency manipulator, a centrally planned economy, and like in my brain, like centrally planned things don't work. And like the China experiment is sort of interesting in a way because they are leveraging like just peak technology. They're using AI and all this complicated stuff to do the central planning. It's not like the Soviets like 50 years ago where some guy was like, I think we need to send this train of wheat to Stalingrad. Like it's like done in a very high tech way. So a lot of people have been like, maybe you can centrally plan if you have all of this dystopian tech, but like I don't think you can. I think this is unraveling. They've obviously like invested in these crazy real estate bubbles that are crumbling.
How much of the culture is at play here in the possibility of an actual uprising? So like Chinese culture, and I'm no expert in this area, so I'm really curious here if you guys can help me understand the situation, because there is a culture of collaboration and collectivism in general, as far as I understand. And it is not so much about the individual and the rights of the individual. And so is there an argument to be made that it's easier to have authoritarian rule in a country like that versus ever in a country like the United States or any Western country? And do you think that makes it less likely that the Chinese people can ever get out of that situation, no matter how painful it becomes? Because there will always be this like, my individual voice is not that powerful and important.
That's interesting. So you take that, and then I think maybe you add on this surveillance state, along with the fact that they have these social scores where you're almost supposed to report on each other. Like, are you going in the right direction? And so you layer that already kind of like cultural dynamic you mentioned, layer on this surveillance and social scoring. And I heard a former like CIA operative speak about, which is more powerful, like the CIA, or I think it's called the MSS, the Minister for China's version of that. And he was like, well, you could argue the MSS is more powerful because basically we've built a group of citizens that are almost a part of it. They're a part of
they're like
reporting.
employees.
Yeah, essentially they're agents of it kind of naturally, and that it actually has the largest force. So I do think
It's a factor.
yeah, it's
Well, that's
for
I
sure
can
a
tell
factor.
you from the Iranian perspective that the reason the uprising is happening and the revolution is happening is because there's a very opposite situation, right? Where the individuals celebrate individuality. Like, yes, there is a culture of, cultural pride in general and things like that, but there's a lot of pride of the individual, the desire to ascend in life, to get educated, to make money, to create wealth, to become somebody, to, you know, people want to become philosophers and artists and poets and scientists, and that's just part of the culture, right? So not that the Chinese don't, please don't misunderstand that, but to say it's ingrained already in the culture where if you take away enough of people's rights, they're going to eventually snap. And the only reason they didn't snap earlier was because they had a revolution that led to a negative outcome. So they were like, fuck, we're not going to have a revolution right after we have a revolution. So then they suffered for 43 years until now. Otherwise, it would have been immediately after.
The Chinese situation is so confounding because like what they're asking for is to not have the most ridiculous COVID restrictions. They're not asking for, you know, new rights that are not allowed. Like they
just want to leave their homes.
Yeah, they just want to be able to leave their homes and not wear a mask and do the things that the rest of the world has been doing. Imagine you're sitting at home in China and you're watching the World Cup and you're like, why aren't they wearing masks?
They've
I don't even think they care about the mask. I think they just want to like not burn alive in their own apartments.
Did you guys see that the stream has changed? Like,
what do you mean?
They don't show the fans on the Chinese stream.
Oh, I
You're
saw
joking.
that.
They don't show the fans at all.
Wait, did they do that originally, or did they like,
No,
hey, we
it's
got to
like-
stop this?
It's on like a 20-second delay.
Yeah, but
and
these
they,
people
like, edited it all out.
can still like Google things and see the world.
No, they can't.
No, they can't.
They can't
They
Google
literally
anything.
can't.
There's
You
no
never
Google.
mean they can't
The
Google
Great
things.
Firewall?
Google.
I thought it was just like
Google is
social.
complicit.
Yeah, no,
and
they came to terms with that. They're gonna.
By the way,
censor.
can we shout out Zuckerberg for a little bit? Because as far as I'm aware, like Facebook has basically decided to not go into China, and they're like, we're not going to do this. But like Google and Apple and some of these other countries, and like I'm also going to throw your
Well, I'm
guy.
gonna have to not shout out Zuckerberg because he's censoring what's going on in Iran. So he's doing two things at once there.
Well, we'll give him partial credit
Partial
because
credit.
I think they opted out of China. Google's just going along. Google's been going along with the Chinese censorship for years. Apple's doing it. So it's no bueno.
But this
on
sounds
that
like North
front.
Korea now. I didn't realize it was to this degree.
Well, it's like it's worse than North Korea. Like North Korea is just like you're just oppressing a bunch of cavemen who you've turned into cavemen because you've just stripped them of all like the elements of modern life. Whereas like China, you are using like hyper like scary like technology to oppress like people who otherwise like are pretty. They live in like a relatively modern society. I mean, like just very extremely modern society in a lot of areas.
I mean, when does the economics of this COVID policy actually, you know, start to change their decisions about the COVID policy? Because I've had some really weird things happen in the last week. I got notified that Chinese New Year, which is normally a 3-week period, usually in February, where everyone goes home from the factory. So if you are ordering products from China, you have to be very aware of Chinese New Year. No one will be manufacturing goods. No one will be shipping goods.
Yes.
You have to plan and order inventory ahead of that. Apparently, it's going to be almost twice as long because there's not as much demand for these factories. And the data, it's funny because like I think on Monday, I got told that. And then yesterday, Tuesday, the Chinese PMI came out and it's below 50, which means contraction. So, and I've heard reports of factories literally going under. When we've been negotiating with certain products we're buying, they're like, well, I can't lower the price because this product was made, the raw materials that are going into your product were made 2 months ago. And I'm like, well, aren't you constantly making new ones? Like, well, no, because we don't have demand. So I'm seeing like really weird anecdotal things that I don't typically see. And so, you know, the demand for being the world's manufacturing factory is declining. And at what point is that going to affect, one, I thought about how's this going to affect the US economy? And then how is that going to affect, you know, leadership in China? Like, when are they going? Is someone telling Xi this? Like, or are they too scared to be like, hey man, I hate to bring this because I don't want you to kill me, but things are not going so well.
Is it like I feel like the media generally treats like China in like this kind of like kid glove sort of way, and they almost like build up Xi to be sort of this like evil genius kind of thing, who like really knows what he's doing, and China is this super competent power, blah blah. Is it possible that they don't know what they're doing and that like what you're saying is true? Like, because it seems to me like they're like hastening the demise of their manufacturing sector.
Right.
They're forcing a lot of people like you to look elsewhere to build their supply chains and all this stuff. Like, what is? I can't see the logic in it.
Yeah, I mean,
personally.
for us to pretend to know is stupid because no one really knows. But like, there could be this element of like, no one wants to speak truth to power. I mean, the guy literally just escorted the second, most respected politician out of the Congress party. Just said, no, you're out of here as a show of power. So like, are you going to be the one to be like, hey, that policy you really find a lot of pride in that only 2 people died from COVID in China? Well, it's crushing the whole economy. Like there may be this element where no one wants to speak truth to power.
And like, what's the, like in your mind, if that scenario plays out, like what's the outcome
for us or
for their economy and ours? Like,
I don't know. It doesn't look good. I mean,
ton of onshoring.
yeah, but it's funny because at the same time, the economics have played out where it's incentivizing U.S. Companies to buy more from China because the currency dynamics have changed in the U.S.'s favor. Like things are significantly cheaper. Shipping costs are now below the pre-COVID level.
I saw that. Shipping containers are so cheap.
Below. So they went from like $3,500 for a 40-foot to $20,000. Now they're $2,500. So now they're below that. And with the currency dynamics, I'm like, wow, this is actually like reasonably good now. Like we should speed up some of the purchases we're making, and we can't because of like random week.
off.
The whole factory shut down.
That's
We
crazy.
have employees there who go to factories, and she's like, I can't leave for the next week, and I'm like,
So that's economically. How do you guys think this plays out? Just socially for people, watching these governments clamp down to this level. I feel like we're at a very interesting and important point in history without even realizing it, where there's a battle for power happening where authoritarian rule could go one way or the other. In one sense, like I was saying, the revolution in Iran serves as inspiration for people in China and people in other countries. And I saw some other Middle Eastern countries uprising and things like that. On the other hand, if they're successful in clamping down and making people go home, well, then you could see a rise in authoritarian style rule. We see this in Europe as well. We see this in Hungary. We see this in countries that we wouldn't expect to see this in, where very authoritarian type leaders are stepping up and finding ways to like actually step into power more and more. So like, do you guys see this as the way I'm looking at it, where we could see the world sort of evolving in one of two directions as World War III is sort of looming in our potential?
I do think there's something that kind of ties in what we just talked about. What you're saying is like we're kind of seeing the idea of like the world order getting questioned. So previously, when we allowed China to enter the World Trade Organization, we're like, hey, we welcome to the economy. They rely on the trade that we do together, and they'll over time conform. The authoritarian regime will become a more open regime because, well, they'll need to in order to do this. But we're seeing this now where they're even more authoritarian than they've ever been, and they don't even care about the economic sacrifices that are happening. And so this kind of thesis,
because of the move toward isolationism as a whole, and
I mean, the
kind
COVID
of
policy is one, but I mean, they're on several levels. What are you talking about, the Uyghurs or just the surveillance state? Like they are leaning more, and Xi basically being in power for life. Like we're seeing several ways where they're leaning more into authoritarianism. And the kind of idea was like, well, let's welcome the economy, get them hooked on the money, going back and forth between the countries, and they'll come and play along. But they've clearly shown to the world, to Iran maybe, that like, hey, you can be part of the world economy, but you can also do your own thing, and you can run a country in a different way. And I think the reason that the COVID policy was such a point of pride from China was like, we had 2 deaths and we did it in our own way. And while these other countries had X number of hundreds of thousands of deaths, and we used our authoritarian way of governing, and it worked. And I think it's a sense of pride for
complete bullshit, though.
Yeah, complete. Obviously, yeah. But the economic hook didn't necessarily like work out in this situation. So yeah, I mean, they're showing the world that like you could have a multipolar world, going forward.
Yeah, you expressed that better than I did, and I agree. I worry about that. That's an area that I worry, because I think everything that comes to fruition in the world serves as an example of what's possible. And I think, especially for those types of people that are power hungry and dictator minded, these things happen very quickly. I think you were the one that told me, Stephen, about that Netflix about dictators. What is that one?
Wait, what?
The dictatorship Netflix special.
It's
don't think I told you
the
about that.
Dictator's Playbook, or I don't remember what
good.
it is, but it's like how to
like-
become a dictator. Or
yeah.
something like
Great
that.
title.
Yeah.
But it basically goes through like a role of profiling dictators and what their special, like what their go-to playbooks were, and it's kind of like I don't know. It tries to make it funny.
Yeah.
Do you find it weird, like what we sort of in the media focus on and don't focus on? Like, for
Always
example,
found that weird.
like how many times have you heard people like criticize Apple for China? How many times do people like criticize like LeBron James on China? How many people versus like how much do you hear people criticize the fucking like My Pillow guy?
Oh yeah.
Like it's just like in like we care so much about Ukraine. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but like I don't know. Do you feel like the media really focuses on Iran that much? Do you feel like we focus on China that much? Like I think there's some attention there, but like the Ukraine like Iran coverage is like way off.
Well,
the
we got
charts
the flag, Ukraine flag in our bios and all this shit. Like,
yeah, nobody has an Iranian flag in there.
No.
By everyone's got a Ukraine flag though.
No, but the only reason Iran... it's funny you say that, because the only reason any coverage of Iran is happening is because human citizen journalists and people on social media spoke so loudly for the people of Iran and begged and pushed and got aggressive with every single person they could get in touch with to create enough attention.
that was your aha moment when it was
Yeah.
like it's our obligation to post.
have to.
Right. It had to
There
happen.
is no one else
It
that's
happened,
that's the only way
grassroots,
forward.
whereas
Had to be.
these other things,
They don't give a
feels like
fuck.
they're like shoved down on us from the top.
Exactly.
This is the company you're going to be mad at. This is the country you're going to care about. Why? Like, who's choosing these things?
But you know, to be fair, like now, Iran gets coverage on CNN and on other outlets, not as much still as everything else that they want us to be informed about, and they want to shape the narrative on certain matters. But people have more power than they realize, and they force their way into the mainstream narrative. And I say, like, who cares about the mainstream narrative? Because the way it got there was through the people anyway. So, like, the real power lies with the people.
So the
And
mainstream
we need to
narrative,
stop.
you think, like it follows the people's movement.
Oh, no, only to a certain degree that it's forced
When it
to.
has to, yeah.
It had to.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it will shove its agenda down people's throats. And do I think it's weird? I think it's crazy. I think it's super weird. I think
So weird.
that is the reason that mainstream media, for the majority of human beings that is not completely indoctrinated by leftist propaganda, is questioned. And it's the majority of people these days are now aware enough to say, if this is where you're getting your information, you're asleep.
yeah, like
And most people see that now. But I still see people reach out to me when I post certain things and say, how dare you question our need for mainstream media? I said, of course we need it, but like they need to do their job properly.
Can I say that it took me quite a while? Like it was only until like really the SBF thing to realize I was like, wait a second, like this is being
Yes.
completely misconstrued.
That was another
Like,
huge wake-up
I'm
call
like
for people.
a subject matter expert on this like uniquely crypto thing, and mainstream media is portraying it completely differently. And then it woke me up to the idea like, okay, well, if this, then what? Like, then what other one am I just like
All of it.
not knowledgeable about? And then I'm
It's
just-
all of it, and we're all asleep. We
Yeah.
all don't realize how much of our entire world perception has been created by this. And Stephen, to your point, there's something even more deep that Eric is hitting at that I think we all don't realize. Every single perspective, most likely, that we grew up with was shaped by these goddamn people. And we don't even realize it.
entities,
Our
organizations,
feelings
whatever.
about an entire continent like Africa, all shaped by the mainstream media. Our feelings about how certain political organizations should run and should operate. Our feelings about, you literally fill in the blank, And we are all brainwashed.
gonna
We
need-
don't realize it.
I'm gonna need something a little higher octane than wine now because what we're touching on.
And we're only just at the age or the point in our lives, and the system is so broken that we're finally waking up and realizing that. But what we're only realizing is forward looking and present. We aren't looking back in the rear view to say, what beliefs do I already hold that were given to me? That's what's scary.
Who the fuck's
That's
at
a
the
good
top? Like, who's pushing the agendas?
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's like I don't know if I believe in this. Like there's some elite cabal at the
Yeah.
top directing everything.
What
It
if there
sounds-
is, though?
to some degree, it just
He's like, it would be fun if it was.
it'd be a lot more
That
entertaining
does
for this
sound pretty
podcast.
ridiculous. when
But
you, like,
you
say
could
it.
also just have like a marketplace of stuff
Bunch of these
where
people.
all the incentives.
It's just a bunch of guys podcasting. The private RSS feed.
fucking you guys the whole time. This side of the table, me and Steven are the truth seekers.
You don't think so?
It's more plausible to me that there are just a bunch of free market actors and the incentives of the system just push these players into a particular direction, and it doesn't need to be
It's just like the prevailing
Coordinated.
narrative. The prevailing narrative of the masses is the one that
necessarily.
wins.
But it is still worth asking, like, what are these incentives pushing people? Which I think is a good question in the media thing. Like, why? I mean, it's not a mystery to me why the media doesn't really cover China a lot. Why we don't talk about China a lot? It's money. Like, people just make too much money in China. But Iran is interesting to me. Like, why in like Ukraine? Why do we focus so much on?
Why do we care so much about women's rights, but all the women's rights activists
Yeah.
are fucking not saying a word right
We
now?
just have like selective
for the women
outrage.
in
Like
Iran.
for example, like everybody really cares about Palestine. And I'm not saying you shouldn't care about Palestine, but it's this like tiny area that gets this crazy amount of attention. Meanwhile, there's like people literally just dying at orders of magnitude throughout the world, crazy atrocities that get zero coverage.
Yes,
and then like
very important
Iran is
because
like this
there's
crazy thing, and-
there's other situations just like Iran and China happening that get absolutely zero coverage.
Yeah, like why?
Especially in America, like zero awareness of what's happening in certain countries. Why?
I don't know. Is it random?
Well, I think money and power, and I know it sounds almost trite at this point, but I think it's more powerful than we realize. And I think when it comes to the conspiracy side of this, the tinfoily side of this, here's where I think we get it right and get it wrong. I think everything and what's covered is driven by money and power. And you follow that enough and you see, I mean, we've seen the charts. You guys have all seen the visuals before of how these organizations are connected, how the organizations and the media outlets are connected, and who drives the money and where the money flows. And then ultimately power and votes and politics, right? All those things are commingled. But I think where we get it wrong is that we assume there's a centralized figure and that there's coordination. It's a clusterfuck. There's no coordination. We give too much credit to the powers that be. They're dumbasses. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just corrupt, seeking money and power. So it's very decentralized. It's more decentralized than we think. But the centralized points are the points where all the money flows. But then I think there's a lack of coordination between the different nodes. That in crypto, you can have coordination between the different nodes, right? You can have this decentralized framework where at the end of the day, there can be a consensus amongst the different parties. That's what lacks, I think, in this political landscape.
Well, let's get more specific. Would you agree that the left in this country is like way more supportive of like the Iranian regime than maybe they should be, or than like other like what? Why is it? Like I've never, for example, I've never really, maybe Nick understands it better than I do, but like I've never understood like the famed like Iran deal. Like that always seemed like a weird thing to me under Obama when it was first pitched, and I never got that. There seems to be this weird deference to that regime at the expense of like the people from my perspective, and I wonder like why do these specific political powers that be seem to want to favor the regime? Do you have an opinion on that?
Not a strong one, but not a clear one. But I think it comes down to one of those situations again that's pretty typical of thinking on the left, which is a lack of thinking. It's literally just that sounds right, and then somebody pushes forward an idea, but they're lacking context, information, and they think this. If I signal this as an idea, this is the right idea, but they don't realize that it's completely and utterly wrong and not what is best for humanity.
Is it
it's way more
similar? Is it
nuanced.
similar to what Nick brought up about China? Maybe like there was this idea that like, oh, if we're nice to China. We let them into the system. They'll change. They'll be with us. And like, if we just isolate them, then they'll continue to be evil. But if we just bring them in, then they'll be good.
It's characterized in the deal itself. I mean, what is on the other side of Iran following these restrictions? It's the lifting of sanctions. So it's literally like, hey, you will be open to the world economy again. We will let you into the world economy if you follow these things, so that you can't, threaten Israel. You can't threaten other things. I mean, they didn't even like cover like the ballistic missile issue, but like in general, we can thwart you from becoming a nuclear power and having a seat at the, security table, let's say. In exchange, you get money. But I mean, we've seen with China that thesis doesn't necessarily, it hasn't played out in that scenario. And at first I was very pro that deal. I wanted it to complete, but now I'm like, well, you could show that someone could still be a bad, quote unquote, bad actor, even though they're ingrained in the world economy. And it doesn't necessarily preclude them from, funding wars, fighting enemies, being authoritarian, pushing down human rights. So I think they're still working with the same thesis, and I'm not sure it's gonna work in that scenario.
These things are very nuanced. Like again, just to your question, think about how complicated that situation is. You have people living under a dictatorship, economically starved, not able to live the lives that they would ideally want to live, right? They're just completely fucked in so many ways. They can't get access to the education that they desire, rising costs, all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, a deal comes on the table and they hate their government. And then Americans don't realize that. They think, no, we should support these people. We should do this deal because it sounds right and it will help their economy and blah, blah, blah. But really, we're negotiating with criminal killers and terrorists. Did you know that in general, Trump was very popular for Iranian people? Why? Because he was seen as the one that would not bow down and negotiate with their government.
It was one of the first things he
was like, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
And the people, a lot of Iranians were like, this is exactly what we need because it'll help us move toward the revolution we see today. They wanted revolution. I know, you love that. They wanted revolution. They want someone to come in.
Spicy, I like spice.
Well, but that's the reality. They hate their government, right? We're seeing it today. They've always hated their government.
So
They just
imagine
didn't
that
wanna
government.
die. They didn't
Imagine
wanna
that
die.
government with a bigger budget, bigger pockets, more power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they're conflicted. They're like, well, we're fucking losing here
Right.
as people. Because what are these mullahs doing? Taking all the money, putting it in their pockets. By the way, you'll get a trip out of this. Do you know where all the families of the mullahs live? Outside of Iran, in Canada, America. Have you seen their daughters? They're all Instagram models. They're all half naked. They're all fucking shaking their asses and have boob jobs and they're half naked.
What's a mullah? Is it like a
mullah, like the people in the Islamic Republic.
But is it like a part of the government, like an official seat, or is it more like you're part of the?
Is any of it really? I don't know. I don't
Like,
know.
So you're telling me the daughters of all the mullahs are living
dude.
abroad in the U.S.
They
as
all got
Instagram
exposed
models?
during this revolution. Not
Wow.
all of them, but so many of them got exposed during this revolution. It's all a show.
A fair number of them.
It's all a show. These people don't care about the religion. They're
They
not
only
religious.
Care about power
power
and
grab.
This
self-preservation.
is not about Islam
it's
for
so
them.
weird.
This is about ruling people and killing them if they they make up new rules every day and they say Islam says that. They just make it up.
I feel like we've seen this movie before somewhere.
So anyway, they're all living outside the U.S. They're pulling as much money as they can into their own pockets, sending it outside into buying assets abroad. What we need to do as a world is come together and say, freeze their assets, take away their visas, don't let them go anywhere, get any safe haven.
Like the oligarchs.
Let the revolution happen and let the people decide what to do with them.
Freeze the assets of the hot Persian girls on Instagram.
I mean,
Not as-
unfortunately,
not
these
as
hot
appealing
girls
as
are
the,
they're getting harassed pretty badly.
Are they?
Yeah.
that's sad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's not, it's not their fault.
Not really their fault.
But it's ironic and very hypocritical. They don't care about the hijab and all those stupid things. They don't give a shit about
if
that.
I was a sexy daughter of an Iranian mullah living abroad, I would at least have the good sense to not be, on Instagram.
No, because they never
Like,
thought they would get exposed.
The gas is a bad look.
It's just like
a
FIFA,
bad
though.
look.
When you go watch the documentary, they thought they were untouchable. These people are mafia. They thought they were never going to be touched. And so what's happening is it's game over
Well,
now.
if Tony Soprano had a TikTok, it might have worked out a little different for him.
All right, are we out of time?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good point to wrap.
That was a good chatter. Yeah, I don't want to get into another thing. We'll be here for another 3 hours.
I didn't know. Was it a message of? Yeah, we can wrap. I'm excited. This was really good.
I think we ended on a hopeful note, right?
I don't know if it was that helpful. Eric, do you have anything positive for us?
He's like,
He's like, I need
Mullah
to,
daughter
I need
Instagram.
I need some Instagram handles.
Iran daughter Instagram profile
There was
picture.
there was this like smoke show at the World Cup.
You saw that?
Yes, she was on Twitter. Did you see it? Nick, this girl came on TV, this beautiful Persian girl, and Nick was like, hello. And then I opened up Twitter, like the next day. It was entirely Nick, not me at all. And I opened up Twitter
What
the
happened
next
to your
day,
feed?
and she's all over the feed. It was
Really?
the exact girl.
Some guy was
People
like,
screenshotted it.
I will give her a green card. Someone reach out to me. Wokes came in and just
Dude,
destroyed
I
him.
actually saw a comment that said like, "This is the first time that the people of Iran saw how beautiful this woman is." And I thought that was like pretty reasonable. It's like,
That the people saw.
yeah, because normally she's all covered up. Like,
Yeah. Well, who knows where she was actually from?
I also as an American just felt a little straight. I was looking at like the dichotomy of like the Iranian fans and the women on TV, and then they'd cut over to American guys, get some Uncle Sam hat and like mustard on his face,
cheese head,
just, like, just cheese on his head. Just like, I was like,
oh, man. Yeah, that was good. That was good.
We'll see them. We're going to talk about the Dutch next. We should let the World Cup decide
Yeah,
our
yeah.
geopolitics.
That is a great way to do
Well,
it.
There's
except the
some
U.S.
good-
may not last longer than this next
there's
round.
some good
so.
topics we could talk about in the Netherlands, right?
good at cheese.
I mean,
Some of the farm
Max,
stuff.
I've considered
Max
citizenship.
Verstappen of Dutch descent, Formula One world champion.
Yep,
That's
good
one
point.
thing we could talk
Did
about.
you know that as an American, it's very easy to get Netherlands residency and
I
visa?
did not.
Oh
but
yeah,
I want
it's one of the
to
easiest in
now.
the world. You can literally call yourself a digital nomad, and I think as long as you like, it's very simple, and it has to do with a specific
Just costs
law
money.
and relationship. No, not much.
Really?
No. There's no crazy fees. There's no nothing. You can get residency very easy.
I think there's a lot of crypto folk that would be very excited to hear about this.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in living in Europe, I mean, I can't think of a better city than Amsterdam. Although you don't have to be in Amsterdam, you can be in Rotterdam, you can be in all kinds of places. Very cool country.
Anywho,
That'll do, pig.
it's a long outro.
That'll
but
do.
we'll-
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right, much
Bye.
love. See you
Cheers,
guys
everyone.
next time. Peace.